I want to introduce our second panel. This is a fun one for me because, as I said, I'm a Washington correspondent for CNBC, and I rarely get up here to the stock exchange. But now we have a bunch of political figures up here, so I can really sink my teeth into these guys. I've been looking forward to this all week. On our panel today, we've got Matt Blunt. He's the president of the American Automotive Policy Council and former governor of Missouri. We have Ari Fleischer, the president of Ari Fleischer Sports Communications and former White House press secretary. And we have Joe Trippi. He's the former national campaign manager of Dean for America. And thanks to all three of you for joining us today. And we don't have a real formal presentation here in mind for you guys today. I wanted to start a little bit with some politics because everybody here comes out of politics, and then sort of see where the area is where politics and business are really coming together. And so I think the first question I would throw out to the panel, and just for anyone to reach out and grab, 2008 was the breakthrough moment for social and for the internet on the campaign trail, though a lot of folks would trace that back to the Dean campaign, Joe, in 2004, really sort of inventing the tool set. But what are we seeing going into 2012? Now we're a year out from Election Day. What are we seeing now in social and on the internet, in politics, that we didn't see in 08? Because so much has changed even just since then. So whoever wants to start.
Well, I'll grab it real quick. I think the biggest thing to think about when you think about the power of what's happening is, and you can, and I think politics actually is instructive about it, is that James Carville used to say it's the economy stupid, and it is the economy stupid, but since 2003 it's been the network stupid. And what's really changed, the big change that's happened, is the network's gotten bigger every year and keeps growing every year. So in 2003 and 2004, the day the Dean campaign's over, there were 1.4 million blogs in America. In the day Obama started his candidacy, there were 77 million blogs. YouTube did not exist in 2003. The Will I Am video that that went out for Obama in 2008 couldn't have existed, or would not have gotten millions and millions of views in 2003. So what's happening is the reason campaigns are becoming bigger and more adept has a lot more to do, and one of the big shifts from Dean to Obama, and I think you'll see it again this year, and it will continue, is the size of the network, the number of people on the network, and the power of the tools those people have that we didn't have 4 years ago, that we don't have today, that are going to be there 4 years from now as the network gets bigger and the tools get more powerful that are in individuals' hands. It's going to be even more disruptive to business as well. And the change that you're already experiencing is going to get even bigger.
But first of all, let me just thank the New York Stock Exchange for putting this on, and to NMS also for organizing it and asking all of us to be here. It's always great to be in this venerable old building. I'm just disappointed the stock market is so down today. But let me go back in time a little bit, because what's fascinating to me about social media today in the context of campaigns and corporations is how nothing has changed. It all goes back to the fundamental art of people wanting to talk to people. And in politics, talking to people is paramount, because that's how you win or lose. And so politicians and presidential campaigns, especially in the modern era, always are the most cutting edge thing out there that you watch and you learn from, because it's so intense, so serious, so important. It rises to such a giant crescendo and crashes down, win or lose, that campaigns get pretty good at this just because they have no choice but to be good at it. So go back in time, though. It used to be just pamphlets, was American politics and how you got your message out. And then came out sort of yellow journalism. It became how people had to communicate if they weren't the loudest speaker in a room, which was how you measured a good speaker. He had a booming voice. Radio came along and changed communications and politics. And FDR was so good at using radio. TV came along. In 1960, JFK beat Nixon in the debates because Nixon sweated, some people will say, and that looked bad on TV, and Kennedy looked so good. The point I'm making here is technology changes, communication doesn't. So where are we now with technology? Go back to the 96 race. Bob Dole, when he was running against Bill Clinton, Dole wanted to show he was elderly and he needed to show he was young. And in the middle of one of the debates, if you remember this, he wanted to tell people to log on to his website. Websites were pretty new in 1996. And he said, you can go look at my whatchamacallit in a debate. And if anything drove home, Bill Clinton was young, new. Bob Dole was old, has been. That captured it. And now you've got internet, you've got Twitter, you've got Facebook. In 2007, a corporate client of mine asked me to do an event to explain how Facebook is affecting corporations and how politicians use it. Well, I was 46 years old. I didn't know anything about Facebook. So I quickly learned. And I saw very quickly that Barack Obama, the senator from Illinois, had so many followers, so many more than Hillary Clinton. And they both had so many more than John McCain. I wasn't really sure what Facebook was, but I knew what it meant to have a lot of people following you in politics. And that was my first clue that people better pay attention to this Obama guy. There's something there. And now, to immediately answer your question about what's new, what's next, what I see in Twitter especially, and I love Twitter, I love Facebook, I do a lot of both. All reporters now are on Twitter. Reporters communicate on Twitter first and foremost. And I follow my news now thanks to Twitter. And I can communicate with reporters on Twitter. So if you want to stay on top of everything that's going on in your industry, you need to be monitoring what's being tweeted about you. You need to especially monitor what reporters are saying about you on Twitter. And we'll talk about this later. There are different ways you should and can engage on Twitter that makes what you're communicating relevant and actually work.
Governor, what are you seeing that's new this year?
Well, I would just, I think to add on to what's said, none of this is really new, that people are trying, elected officials, politicians are trying to communicate with voters in a way they're comfortable with. My father tells a great story about Sam Rayburn, who of course was a very famous Speaker of the House, and he had an office policy that he responded however he was contacted. So at that time, if somebody sent in a letter that was written in pencil, they responded in pencil. Somebody sent a letter written in ink, they responded with a letter written in ink. Somebody sent a typewritten letter, they responded with a typewritten letter. And it was all about making that constituent feel comfortable. And today he'd say if somebody sends us a tweet, we send them a tweet back. So that's really sort of an age-old principle of politics. I would argue, I think politicians and campaigns are not necessarily early adopters, but they are very rapid adopters. And they're able to quickly build Twitter followings and Facebook followings in a way that's really impressive if there's a real focus. And a lot of that has to be driven, I think, by the candidate. I think it's really hard for a campaign to fake a real sense of comfort with social media. So I think the candidate himself actually generally, and there's certainly exceptions, but generally has to be comfortable with those tools if they're going to use them well. But I think it's difficult to predict what the next big disruptive event's going to be in campaigns. Certainly Barack Obama was disruptive, and I use that as a compliment because he disrupted the system. I think it's hard to predict who the next disruptor will be.
Ari, you raised the point of that social is just basically the same thing that politicians have been doing forever, which is developing followers, interacting with people. But the thing that strikes me, I spend some time over at the White House in the press office there, and the thing that strikes me about the difference...
My condolences.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's if you've ever been there, it's a tiny little rabbit warren that they squeeze us into. But what's different between the Obama White House and the Bush White House when you were there, and even the Clinton White House before then, is when you went into the press office, the phones would be ringing off the hook. And the press guys would be on the phone talking to reporters constantly, and they had the classic thing with the guy with two phones. You go into the Obama press office, and it is deadly quiet. And that's because they're not talking on the phone to reporters anymore. A lot of those press guys don't want to talk to reporters on the phone, but they're constantly tweeting, emailing, pushing stuff out on the internet. And that's how they're doing it. And so the difference now, though, is not just the technology, but the speed with which they have to respond. I mean, you get these 1-hour news cycles now that you didn't have before. So it's the same thing, but it's going so much faster. And Joe, maybe if you could jump in. I'm just wondering how politicians, and then by extension businesses, have to respond so much quicker. How can you do that? It's getting to the limit of sort of human physical endurance in some ways to respond within minutes or hours to something that's really important.
You know, I was at the White House from 2001 to 2003, before there was Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and really before reporters used email. It's remarkable. A lot of reporters who I have in my Rolodex or my BlackBerry now, I didn't have their email addresses for them when I left the White House. I later acquired them because it was all over the phone. And frankly, if you promise not to tell your journalistic colleagues about this, reporters make a terrible mistake when they do everything through email with sources. I love it when a reporter is willing to take an email reaction from me. Because what the reporter's missing is, did I hedge? Did I dodge? Did I have to collect my breath? Can he detect that I'm weaseling out of something?
And the chance to follow up.
A chance to follow up. Reporters who are just accepting anything that you email to them are letting a source off the hook. So keep doing it, please. It's very helpful to my clients. But go ahead.
No, I would say, obviously I agree with all that, but I think one of the things that's going on is it's not just the speed. This isn't the same thing in the following context. It has happened before. This isn't just a shift in communications. If that's all it were, this would be a pretty easy exercise. It's a shift in power. And the closest thing I can go to is before the printing press, if you were really wealthy, you could have a scribe or hire a monk or somebody to write your personal copy of the Bible or any important document, Constitution, those kinds of things. And all knowledge and information tended to be in the hands of those people who could afford to do that. And then the printing press happened, and all of a sudden the pamphlets can start happening, yellow journalism gets out there. The shift in power, Thomas Paine can write Common Sense, and all of a sudden the monarchy's in trouble. And so that's where we're at now. This is a big, big, big shift, not just in the speed of information, but in the power of who has it. And that's what's causing a lot of the disruption. There's a book, Glenn Reynolds, a conservative, wrote a book called Army of Davids that talks about how individual groups can self-form out there an army of Davids to take on Goliath. Have learned communication from the position of Goliath in a one-to-many operation. It's changed significantly. And the best way to give you a good example of this, we've seen it, is if 5 people email you telling you that the hot movie this weekend sucked, it doesn't matter anymore how many millions of dollars the studio spends telling you it'll be the greatest movie you ever saw. You're not going. And so the White House, I mean, to get in front of that, to have evangelists out there, which they have plenty of, to spread their messaging, which means they can dodge the press too, not just not hearing your voice whether they're dodging or not, but dodge it and go around and deliver their own messaging. And I think that's where politics in 2003, 2008, we're seeing it today, is I think out of necessity understanding the shift in power more than corporate America is right now.
Because obviously, politicians live or die by public opinion. But in many ways, I think politicians and companies are dealing with the same problem here. I mean, they both need public opinion. You need voters or you need customers. It's kind of the same thing on one level. And I'm wondering, who's doing this better? Who's responding to this kind of huge change, as Joe's just pointing out, better? Is it the politicians who are nimbly reaching out to voters, or is it the corporations who, as we saw in the last panel, are trying to figure out where their customers are and reach them on a daily basis?
Well, I don't think politicians have the same benefit of market segmentation. They can't sort of focus on a particular buyer. They have to obviously try and reach the multitude, the entire American voting population. So I think they have, in some ways, more challenges. It's difficult to say because they don't have to really track return on investment in the same way a corporation would. But obviously, they're going to very quickly ramp up, and they're going to see sort of ultimate success or failure on election day.
But there's one link between both, it makes it work. Either use of social media can work for a corporation or not work. Same thing for a politician. And that's being genuine. Mm-hmm. Making sure that whatever media you use captures the voice of your corporation or your politician. You can very quickly tell if it's really the politician tweeting or the staff. And the personality either comes through or it doesn't. And if you're going to be successful on Twitter, you better show personality or be famous. You know, when Tiger Woods came out with his Twitter account, all of a sudden he got hundreds of thousands of followers just instantly. If you read Tiger Woods' tweets, it's not as exciting as some other people's tweets. But for a corporation, I just think there's so much potential here. First, you have to know who you are. Are you to a consumer or are you B2B? And there's room in both. A lot more room if you're making a consumer product, if you're in the sports space, if you're making sneakers. I mean, if you're in that type of mass marketing, having an exciting personality. Cole Shoes does this pretty well. Their personality shows up in their corporate messaging. And it's cutting edge, it's youngish, it's hip, and you know it. If you're a stodgy, boring corporation, and that really is your business model, you're probably going to have to stay stodgy and boring in your social media because it's a little too jarring, it doesn't quite fit. But if you've got room to roam with personality and excitement, it can work, and it's exciting to consumers. It's attractive to consumers, and therefore helps you market. It also helps you with personnel, which is tremendously important too. Since young people all communicate this way, I think it helps you on campuses to recruit the best people who get interested in your companies and like it there. So that though is a starting point. You have to be genuine in both, and you have to capture that.
I'd say two things. First of all, I agree about authenticity. It's the most important thing. It is, you know, the shift from radio is, I would say, it was when you get to, you know, radio's how deep the voice was. Nixon does great. Then you get to Kennedy and what you look like starts trumping what things sound like. And now what this media has done is really insisted on authenticity. And so anybody can fake it on TV for 30 seconds. You're not going to, you know, you're not going to fake it online.
No, it's really hard to fake it on TV for 30 seconds.
well, there are people who can't. I should say that. But but I think to answer your question about who's doing it better, if you believe that it's been a shift in power as well as in communications, and that requires a shift in the way you think, and in some sense a shift in the culture of the communication skills of the company, which I really believe it does. It requires that. Then there are when you look at that, it does not will not work if you continue to think like Goliath and to continue to try to communicate like Goliath, whether it's stodgy or not, whether it's fun, new, different. If you're still trying to communicate in the way we were all trained to do it, in the end, it will turn out to be a problem. And after I read Glenn Reynolds' book, Army of Davids, I started to think he was very close, I thought, and it hit me. You don't want to fight the Army of Davids that are out there. You don't want to be Goliath. You want to figure out how your company, how what you're doing gives your customers, your B2B, the consumers, people, the slingshots they need to get what they want done. Yeah. And I just want to finish this one point. If you can make that shift in communication, and corporate side, Apple. The recording industry said, you're not going to sell music different to all the people out there. The Army of Davids formed to kill that idea and they only wanted to buy one song because the whole album was trash except for the one song that was on it. Apple said, recording industry said, we're Goliath. We're going to tell you how you're going to buy your music, damn it. And Apple said, there's an Army of Davids out there. Let's give them iTunes, iPods, iPhones, iPads. And the Army is grabbing it like there's no tomorrow and running with it. Obama was a campaign that said, here are the slingshots, here are the tools, you go do this, you go build. It started with, we pioneered it, but they made us look silly by 4 years later, and I think that's going to continue. The problem is, competitor-wise, out of necessity, companies are going to get this and start to make that shift like Apple did. And Apple ended up, it was on the brink of death. It's now the largest cap, or I mean, depending on what day the stock price is
depending on whether you look
it's
at it,
the
it's
largest
Exxon or
cap
Apple,
company. They got it. And I think so both, there are great corporate examples of the culture, I think, that's going to rule moving forward in both politics and companies. And look, I'm not talking about making a massive shift, but I would definitely do an audit of everything you're doing in social media and thinking about how that and how you are changing the communication thinking, at least, not necessarily yet, nobody's saying jump into the deep into the pool, but really start to think about culturally how you make that shift within your communications team. And in the Dean campaign, literally, the internet guys were the first thing is just stepped out of my office. I mean, in the old campaign, it would have been political director, field director, and that's changed now. I mean, the communications team can't be an afterthought. Social media, I think, tends to be an afterthought right now, and it needs to be thought out, and the culture of how you deal with it needs to be thought out.
Demographics, though, is a key part of this, too. And I suspect for all of you and your corporations who are trying to find your way and how much emphasis should the corporate people, budgets, staff, talent, attention of the top, focus on social media. And like in any organization, you have to fight for your piece, influence your bosses, and make them convinced that what you're doing is good for the corporation. I did a presentation about a month ago to one of my clients. It's a group of the 100 athletic directors of the 100 biggest universities in the country. And I asked them to raise their hand for how many of them individually had a Facebook page or a Twitter account. And only about 10% of them raised their hands. And then I said to them, how many of the athletes on how many of the students on your campus have a Facebook page or a Twitter account? Raise your hand. And all 100 hands go up. And I looked at them, I said, so you've got a situation here where only 10% of you are speaking in the language that 100% of your students speak. Now, if I were a corporation, and I'm in the board, I'm the CEO, I'm the CFO, I'm the important people, the SVP of communications, who maybe you report to, and I looked around and I said, none of us are speaking the language of all our future customers. It's a problem. You will have a disconnect. So what you're doing is the vanguard. And what you have to, and I say that to you because I think it's the way you can sell more of what you're doing and make people who are looking at bottom lines and profits say, maybe that's true. I don't personally have to have my Facebook account, but I have a corporate interest. I better make sure that we're doing the right things by this and maybe investing more in it. But then back to the basic point, you still have to capture what works about your corporation. Social media doesn't work for every corporation the same way. The differences are massive, and you have to be honest and realistic about what you can get out of it. The sky is the limit if you're in the right part of the sky. Other parts of the sky have limits on how far you can go, but you can all be there. Even the B2B companies can have a social media personality that helps you reach other people in your business segment, because I guarantee you, all the 20, 30, 40-year-olds are talking that language, and so you better connect.
I was just going to say quickly that that's one of the things that at IBM, getting to your point of speaking the language, one of those things they decided to do, which was like heresy like 5 years ago, was to ask every single one of their employees to start their own blog. Not to blog for IBM, that wasn't the reason. It was to get to what Ari's talking about. If you're speaking, you're learning that language, you're learning what that's about, so that they would be able to use that to provide better consulting, better knowledge to their B2B customers on how and speak and learn from doing.
And IBM is very good in this space, and they don't call it social media, they call it social business.
Right.
Speaking of business, on the way down here, I stopped by CNBC's set over here on the floor of the stock exchange and told the anchors what we're doing. And I asked Carl Quintanilla and Melissa Lee, what's one question you have about social media? And Carl, if you follow him, tweets like a madman. I mean, he is constantly on Twitter. Melissa, not so much. And her question I thought was a good one for this panel is, how do you measure ROI on a tweet? What is the value of a single Facebook like for a company? And how can you come up with an equation which translates this social media stuff, which can feel so fuzzy sometimes, and translate it into real dollars and cents?
Well, you know, I'd give an example for one of the companies I work for. I've worked for Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors at the American Automotive Policy Council. And many of you actually may have seen a Wall Street Journal article recently on one of their real successes in social media, which involved actually a spokespuppet. He's actually the only, his name's Focus Doug. He's the only spokespuppet that follows me on Twitter. But he was a character they used, and they made a number of videos that actually they're really, I think they're very funny, very humorous. And they used somebody from The Office and somebody from The Simpsons to craft all these videos. They very quickly got to 43,000 likes on Facebook. And I think perhaps more importantly, of those 43,000, actually about 61% of those people, who tended to be younger people that might not normally think about a Ford Focus, said they were more likely to buy a Ford Focus because you actually did learn a lot about the characteristics of this very well-designed car from these great videos. So I think that's a way to evaluate it, to see how quickly you can take something like a spokespuppet, Focus Doug, and really take it from paid advertising on Facebook to a viral sensation with a certain audience, and then to see how many of those folks say it causes them to take a second look at a Focus, even though they might not have originally done so.
My answer would be very straight to them. How do you value the worth of going on TV? There's no difference. If image is important to you, if your reputation is important to you, if the company's way it presents is important to you, it's all one and the same. TV, radio, newspaper, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all the same. It's all what your company looks like, how it presents to other people, and it can help with you with your sales, it can help you with your recruitment, it can help you just with your reputation in your industry. It's seamless, no difference. They all count. When it comes to communications, I'm just kind of an all of the above guy, and sometimes a tweet is the way to get your message out. More often than not, you can't get anything through the media. I mean, there aren't enough reporters left anymore. What you do may not be important enough to be hard news, but you certainly can own your own communications accounts and get the message you like to the people who are interested enough in you.
I actually think that it may take a real corporate disaster, literally a social storm pulling a corporation out of the sky to get a lot of corporations to understand how powerful this is going to be and how they better start at least moving forward on it.
Do you think that's coming, or do you think that's a realistic
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's happened in politics already where you'll have, was it Conrad Burns who was caught sleeping in a senator who was nodded off in the middle of a Senate hearing.
He wasn't the first.
Right. Wasn't the first, but he was the first one to do it that got caught and put on a YouTube video. And like several 100,000 people got spread around like crazy, and it started his whole downward spiral out of office. I mean, there were other things that then ended up happening on top of that, but we've seen moments that got grabbed, the macaca moment, other moments that turned viral on the net and took someone down. The example I would give you is Wendy's, because it's easy. Wendy's, the woman who found a finger in her chili. Do you remember? Anybody remember that? A few years back, this woman found a finger in her chili. ABC, NBC, CBS, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, everybody reported that this woman found a finger in her chili. Big front page news and big heart-stopping news on network television. People stopped eating at Wendy's for a while, right? I mean, who wants to go and find fingers in their chili? But it turned out about 3 weeks later, the woman was arrested. It was in San Jose, California, I think. She was arrested because it turned out it was an insurance fraud thing. She had won a finger somehow in a poker game or a thing and decided to stick it in the chili and try to sue Wendy's for millions of dollars. These stories were all reported in tiny little boxes in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Okay, fast forward. On that day when all three networks ran that story, it was 21 million people, I think, who might have been watching the networks that day. If two kids in a garage, like the Jib Jab guys who made those funny videos of George Bush and Kerry and Cheney and Rumsfeld on the 2004 campaign, go and make a cartoon video of people biting into Wendy's burgers and cartoon fingers are flying out. And the next scene to silly music is a bunch of them in the Wendy's with the menu behind them, and as they're dancing, fingers start missing. And we're all laughing, and we're all sending this on to our friends because we think it's the funniest thing we've ever seen. The press statement from Wendy's saying that the person was arrested, it was all fraud, could you please send this onto your address book like you did that video that's killing us? No one's going to do it because not because it's not possible. What is possible and what's important about Carl's tweets is he's building up a relationship with the people that follow him. And so it doesn't matter whether he's tweeting, had oatmeal for breakfast today, hey, what's going on with Apple or whatever, he's building up that relationship. And when, if Wendy's has thought about the power shift and about using social media to build the relationship with its demographic, I mean, and how you do that, hey, name our next chicken sandwich. We're about to do it, name it, go online, but yeah, right, but name it. And then, hey, come get the chicken sandwich that America named. You're built, and it's happening on Twitter. I mean, that's an easy one because it's a consumer company. But I'm saying that I think it's very important. First of all, I think this is definitely going to happen, and you're starting to see it already. I mean, and I don't want to, it's not just the Occupy Wall Street thing and Tea Party and other stuff, but you're going to get. Somebody's going to do something, say something, actually change their pricing, and instantaneously a bunch of people can connect and say, we're not doing that. Remember the Apple iTunes Napster thing. That's what I'm saying. That's going to happen more powerfully and much faster, and it will be in a firestorm, I think. I really believe that's going to happen. I'm trying to say I think what you're doing is very important for your company. How you put a value on that and how and I understand because I've consulted for a lot of companies where you get to the C-level and it's like there's trying to get anybody to think about this or think it's important starts to become a bigger and bigger problem. I believe that's true.
I think for you internally, this is another great selling point. Joe is really onto something here because you can sell an insurance policy through social media. And so when your bosses are frustrated, they say, how come we can't get our message out? We did this and people aren't listening. Or as the fallback, in case something does go terribly wrong, wouldn't it be great instead of having 5,000 people who follow you who like you on Facebook, you had 1 million. Mm-hmm. So when something does go wrong, you can go around the filter of the media and get it to a massive list. You are selling an insurance policy to protect the company's bottom line by building up your followers. Absolutely. That's a tremendous economic asset to your company. You only get to 1 million through hard work, through being clever, through being creative, and plotting it forward over time, unless you're so famous that you can turn on a dial and get 1 million, which most companies can't do. But that insurance policy theory, I've done it with my sports athletes sometimes too. And not to use Herman Cain as an example, but if an athlete was accused of something, do they want to work through the media in a locker room for sometimes these athletes who are just not good at communicating to the press? Or wouldn't it be great if you could go around the press because you had 1 million followers?
I'm glad that we're having this conversation about what can go wrong on the internet. We haven't even mentioned Anthony Weiner yet at all, which is, I think, pretty cool. I know I've got a bunch more questions, but I know that we have a group here of folks who definitely want to get in, and so we missed the chance in the last panel. I want to just look around the room, see if there are hands. Why don't we go ahead and get to questions, because I want to get, you know, everybody involved. We'll get the Army of Davids here involved with the Goliaths and see how it goes. Who's first? Go ahead.
I think it's hard to do it for investor relations. Investor relations is pretty straightforward, buttoned down, and serious. I look at more on the communication side, but it would include a nugget of investor relations, just as when you put out a news release and you have facts to disseminate more broadly, because you do still have your SEC rules you have to comply with in terms of broad dissemination. It's the nugget that gets included on social. But I think social really goes so much more and so much bigger than that. IR just is not the right fit. I don't know.
Go ahead. I think we have microphones too, if people want to make sure we can be heard in the back.
Okay, with all the social connectivity and power to the individual, why then are we seeing lesser or lower and lower voting numbers? What is the disconnect? Why are people not engaging at some point?
That's a great question.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Yeah, the trend is the opposite. Voter turnout has actually increased, and I think it's the last 3 presidentials in a row, 2000, 2004, 2008. The presidential election, at least, increase in voter turnout among all demographics, especially in 2008.
I think that's only true for the presidential elections. If you go across other elections, there's a clear sliding downward trend.
No, the specials this year have all had much higher turnouts than people thought they were going to have. And I think in the midterms they've increased generally as well. They're always down from presidentials for turnouts always lighter in midterm elections, but they've been exceedingly, in relative terms, going up every year.
I'm curious from the perspective of a guy who has actually run for office. How do you make sure that you translate those Facebook followers who might be sitting at their computers, make sure they actually get up, go to the polling place, and become voters? I mean, there could be a disconnect there.
Yeah, I guess go to the question. I would say the intensity of participation is certainly higher than any time in my lifetime. Common citizens, average citizens, are able to talk about complex political issues on both sides of the argument with a degree of just information and complexity that really was lacking, I think, in the past. People really are engaged, again, liberals and conservatives, in very complex issues, and they've got into a lot of the details in a way that they haven't historically. So I think there's a lot of intense participation out there. I've actually not run for office when you had a tool like Facebook, which is something I was elected governor in 2004, which is the last time I ran for office, but Facebook wasn't around. Having participated in campaigns since then, I think you're going to have more and more certainty on election day as to who is going to vote for you. Candidates, I think, are going to start to go into election day at some point, maybe knowing everybody that's willing to vote for them and able to contact every single person that's going to cast a ballot for them on that election day and make sure they vote. So I think you're going to see increasing sort of awareness of candidates about where they really stand. I think election day is going to become less of in terms of the raw number of people that are willing to go and vote for you, it's going to become less of a question mark for campaigns and candidates as you go into the future, because people are really going to know everybody that's going to vote for them on election day.
The one thing we have seen is there's been dramatic shifts in energy within parties, even when these increases in turnouts are going up. So in 2004, there was a big energy drop-off interest in the election once Kerry got the nomination on the Democratic side, and a lot of the intensity for turning out was on the Republican side or a lot more intensity. And then in 2008, that shifted big time. and particularly among younger people with Obama. And now it's shifted, at least today, it's shifted back to where Republicans have a lot more intensity this time around than Democrats do. But Ari and I were talking about that right before we walked up here, and that can turn on based on who gets nominated, a whole bunch of different things that happen. So it's too early to tell yet whether you'll have an increase in intensity and on which side it is. But at least today, it looks like it's more on the Republican side than on the Democratic side.
What they would say on the question too is you have, I think, seen declining fall off in local, municipal, school board type elections. And I think those types of issues really haven't lent themselves well yet to social media. And I think that will change. But as of yet, social media is really dominated by national politics and national issues, which is why even in a state like Missouri, candidates for the state legislature are often talking about national issues that won't have all that much to do with their actual responsibilities. But at some point, I think you'll see those local issues really gravitate towards social media in the same way.
The one thing I'd say right off the bat is, look, we're talking about ridiculous numbers. We're still at the very bottom of this thing, the very beginning of it, right? People are doing somersaults down the street because some guy named Barack Obama got 13 million people to sign up for him online, and 3 million of them gave him money. There's 300 million Americans, 3 million people gave the guy some dough. Okay, in 2004, it was 650 given to Howard Dean, 650,000 given to Howard Dean. We are at a place where I guarantee you, whether it's 2016, the numbers that Obama had are going to look ridiculous. And the number of people, because of how easy it is and how the movement of information happens, these numbers are going to go, and the power is going to become, of the army is going to become even more on both sides and on either side, to the point where, frankly, I really believe, and this would be instructive for corporate America too, I really believe that both parties are in deep trouble. That there's absolutely nothing now that stops some third person. Ross Perot in this environment, not 1990, not 1992. I'm talking about the way that guy could connect with millions of people deciding tomorrow morning I'm joining him. I like what he did with the little chart, even though he's a little, well,
Whoever
you know.
can
But anyway, my point is, I'm being nice. I'm being nice. Okay.
Whoever can find the comfort zone between Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party, you mobilize both of those, and you've got something that's really powerful. I don't know.
Well, but this goes to your point about whether it's top-down Goliath or armies of David. Right. An independent party, if it were to launch in America, would be armies of David. Right. It's locked in right now. You have to deal with election laws, which come from Goliath, that make it hard to qualify to get on ballots. But this David versus Goliath thing is fascinating. The power shift, power is a great way to look at it, where communications used to be top-down, and now you can create so much of it. Just to give you a few more numbers on it, when Reagan was president, 90 million Americans got their news from the 3 networks. Now about 28 million people watch the 3 network news programs. They've all gone somewhere else, and that somewhere else is diffuse. So for you in corporate America, what it means is the niches are out there and they're capturable. You don't have to just mass communicate anymore. Finding your niche to get the maximum number of followers that's achievable in your industries is what you should be working on. Some industries, maybe it's 10,000 people. Other industries, it's millions.
Let's see if I can get 1 or 2 more questions. And we've just got a couple of minutes left, but I know we got some people who might want to ask some questions. I saw a couple of hands earlier. Pete.
All 3 of you were innovators in your field. What do you see coming around the corner as far as whether it's platforms that you think may pick up use, or just whether it's campaigns and what corporations are going to be using social that we're going to be talking about in the next 18 months or so?
I suspect the best people to ask that to are 25-year-olds who are working on these campaigns, who are out there every day in the trenches figuring out ways to communicate. My guess is you're going to see incredible enthusiasm among bases because you can reach your followers on Twitter and Facebook, learn information about them, learn where they live, because you have to ask them and they'll voluntarily tell you. And then I can figure out in every key swing district in America where I've got the most enthusiastic people and turn them out, turn them on, get them knocking on doors and doing the old-fashioned thing, because I found them through social media. Powerful nut and bolt. The other, my guess, is just what I alluded to earlier, communication with reporters. It's all being done on Twitter these days. Pretty straightforward. But there's probably some big new next out there that's going to hit in the course of this presidential that I can't figure out yet, that's just going to naturally bubble up by one of these campaigns.
Look, cloud, social, mobile. Everything is moving to those three things: cloud, social, mobile, everything. And what the innovation will be is going to, it tends to come from necessity. In the Dean campaign, we didn't have anybody who was going to give us a dime. I mean, Howard's mother didn't know he was running and probably didn't think it was a great idea when she found out.
Voted for Kerry.
So, you know, we out of necessity pioneered a lot of the stuff that we did. And we created Dean TV, which was, it turns out, YouTube, but we just, when the campaign fell apart, we didn't take it to a VC. I'm still shooting myself over that. But what I'm trying to say is, I think it's more likely that you're going to see innovation out of one of the Republican challengers. I'm not saying that Obama won't, but I'm saying it tends to happen out of political necessity, I think. And so whereas in, you know, somebody a kid in their garage can decide they're going to start trying to do personal computers or an Napster or something, that kind of innovations, you know, we're going to see too. So that I think there'll be some powerful tools like YouTube that I didn't know were going to exist. The interesting thing about that question is at the end of the 2003 campaign, 2004 campaign, having clear, you know, I don't think anybody will deny we pioneered, you know, internet campaigning. If you had sat every single person in that campaign down and said, okay, what's next? Would we have predicted 100 million people on a thing called YouTube? Facebook, which was only on Harvard and I think had just leapt to its second campus, would be, you know, hundreds of millions of people worldwide, that there would be something called Twitter, and that millions of people would be communicating in 140 characters or less. I mean, you know, so now trying to get to who is out of necessity going to innovate the big thing that's going to make us go, whoa. And there will be, that we know, I think is going to happen. It'll be but I think everything is moving to cloud, social, mobile in that direction. And I think there are a lot of great companies out there pioneering stuff, and I think we'll see both corporate and probably the first innovation that will be during this 2012 campaign. We'll see something that will make everybody go like, how do we start learning how to do that?
If I can, let me give Governor Blunt the last word here because we're about over time.
A couple of things I'd say on it. I think on social tools today, campaigns tend to use those to drive and maximize their base. And I think maybe the next level is to really figure out how you really reach independent voters with social tools. There are obviously ways to do that, but I don't know that campaigns do that really well today because it's so much about driving and maximizing the base of voters. And I think there are lots of platforms out there that are really unexplored by candidates still. Foursquare has 10 million people on it. There's really no campaign or candidate in the United States today that utilizes Foursquare well. So I think there are lots of potential platforms for candidates to use.
With that, as you can tell, we could go on, you know, all afternoon on this, but I want to thank the panel. This is a fascinating discussion. I don't think we've even begun to scratch the surface of it, so thank you guys. Thank you for listening, and thank you to New Media Strategies and the New York Stock Exchange for inviting me. Appreciate it.